Hey guys, what's up? This is Evan from Stock Music Musician, and today I want to show you the new Reason Bassline Generator Player. This is now included with Reason Plus, and separately it's available for sale in the Reason store. I'll put a link down below if you want to pick it up. It is not included as part of Reason 12. It is not an update to Reason 12. This is standalone, so either you got to buy it separately or subscribe to Reason Plus. But I don't want to talk about any of that in this video. In this video, I want to give you some examples of the bassline generator and show you how you can quickly use it in your music to start making it better, faster, and easier. I'm also going to give you a quick review. You'll notice there are time sections you can skip to, so just see what you want to see. If you're just more interested in my thoughts on it, or if you want to hear demos of it, or if you just want to learn how to use it. It's all going to be in this video. One more thing I'll add, though, is that I do have a free mixing template for Reason users. There's a link to download it below. It'll basically have you making better sounding mixes with less effort and faster so that your music is just going to sound professional and you'll have more time to focus on the fun stuff like writing new songs that you don't need to be writing as opposed to finishing tracks. So let's jump in. I've got 3 example tracks, super simple. Like, this is not intended to be like I've programmed this to the perfect sound. This is just like, all right, can it do this style? Okay. Can it do that style? Okay. So the first one is kind of a hip-hoppy bounce thing, just using a simple loop with Dr. X, and that's going to be for all of these, and just a simple pattern. And here we're using one of the presets for monotone. And I'm just trying to give you an idea of what type of rhythms this comes up with. So, let's listen. To me, rhythmically, that sounds really good. You can see I've got several basses over there hanging up on in a case over there. I played bass for like 25 years in bands, on recordings that have been streamed hundreds of thousands of times. To me, rhythmically, this is probably how I would approach this song. Melodically, not as much. And the fills are definitely kind of weird, but not terrible, especially since you can always just send this to the track using this feature or direct record and then manually assign it. You can also manually adjust the pitch or the rhythm. If I was looking for a starting point for inspiration, I think this isn't terrible. I think it's pretty good. So now let's move to the next track. And so this is more like of an EDM track. Again, just a loop and a preset. We'll bump up the tempo here to 120. And let's take a listen. Now that's a good fill there. To me, that also feels pretty natural. Again, there's a lot we can do, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute to make this work better or worse, but I just kind of want to give you an overview of what this can do. And this is all pretty much instant. Like, I moved some knobs, but I did not draw anything in. This is much more effective at creating bass lines than just using like a matrix on random or trying to use an arpeggiator or something like that. This behaves like a bass player or a bass line would behave rhythmically and more or less melodically, and it fills where it should fill. It feels groovy. It feels right. So like as a bass player, I'm probably not going to use this just because it's one of like the way I approach music is everybody has their talent, like has like their special sauce. You know, some people are really good at drum programming. Some people like can shred on guitar, whatever. I think I can make really groovy bass lines. So for me personally, this is not that appealing, but if I didn't know what was going on with a bass, I would say this is super helpful. And actually, this is a weird place to say it in the video, but I'll say it now. This is the most important tip I can give you about bass lines and maybe about music in general. People think that you are dancing to the drums, that people dance to drum beats. That is an out and out lie. Or not lie, but that's just wrong. People are actually dancing to the bass line. And it's the tension that the bass line creates with the grid of the drums that makes you want to move. How do I know this? Well, if you pay attention to music, it's true. But I have played bass in a lot of bands, and when I'm playing it right, people are dancing. And I know when I mess up, people kind of judder. It's not when the drummer messes up on a fill. People still keep dancing as long as the one is there and the bass is doing what it needs to do. So get your basses right, and everything else will follow. And I think for a lot of people, this bassline generator can help you, even if it's just kind of helping you how to conceptualize useful bass lines, because there are a lot of useful ideas in here. So let's take a look at the last example. And let's just lower the tempo again, because these will feel very different at different tempos, and I'm using different drum loops. So this is more of a funky bass line here. Now, I will say a lot of these patterns do have a lot of that bump bump, which I don't do that much. I think there's more to be said for a bump. Like, I'll mute this and maybe hum how I would approach it, just to give you an example, but boom, 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 dun, 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 boom, dun, 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 boom, boom. And let's listen to how this approached, at least this version. But it is still steady in the way that a bass line should be. Like, what makes a good bass line is predictability and unpredictability. That's that tension that creates the funkiness. And they figured out exactly how to do it. The controls on this, like the way they describe it and the way it works, is really phenomenal. So that's what we're going to jump into right now is, how does this work? Well, what I love about it, first of all, is that it uses the common design language of all Reason patterns. The top section is the same. The pattern selection is the same. This you'll recognize from a lot of other players. So it's really easy to get up and running, and most of the meat is in here. The other thing to say, though, is that for this, there are these patches, and the patches all have different like algorithms underlying them. So like the same setting, this is where a lot of the setting comes from. We'll do something more complex, actually, so you can hear the difference easier. And just at 30 and 30 for the backbeat setting. So that's backbeat setting. Now, if we were to use a totally different algorithm, and we'll set it back to like 30 and 30, or approximately 30 and 30. So it has a very different feel, both melodically and rhythmically. So the first thing to do is to figure out the right pattern to use. It would be nice if these were, the terms are very descriptive, so you can have a pretty good idea where to start. But it would be nice if they had been sorted like in folders, like hip hop, pop, rock, funk. That would just make things a little easier. But the names are very descriptive, although I don't know what Körperbeherrschung. Sorry, all you German folks out there, if that is even German. So let's break it down. Like I said, all the meat of the player is right here and down here. Let's reset this and look at it from its beginning. The first thing, like I said, is you pick the style that is most in line with what you're looking for. So we'll just go back to backbeat. So you can set the root note here to make it different. The next thing you have is the patterns. So a big thing to think about with the bass is there's the onbeat and the offbeat. The onbeat is really driving, and that, like in EDM, would be with the kick, right? Bum, 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 bum. Although in rock and pop and in every genre, where you might consider the onbeat and the offbeat is a little bit different, and that's why it's important to select the right type of preset for this. These controls basically cycle through a bunch of preset patterns. And there are 64 variations of onbeat. Not necessarily in increasing complexity, but more or less in increasing complexity. And let's hear that with the drums. So that's already pretty funky as it is. And you just heard that dan kind of over here. That was the offbeat. So now let's do the opposite. So the offbeat is kind of like what you would think of in reggae, where it's like, which reggae really emphasizes the offbeat, but all sorts of genres have work getting done in the offbeat. You know, in EDM, it might be the open hi-hat, whatever. Usually on the bass, you're almost always going to hit on the one. And so we'll listen to this with just a little bit of offbeat, and then we'll listen to it as we increase the amount and variety of the offbeat. And all the way now. And then we also have fine tuning for how loud the relative onbeats versus offbeats are and how long they are. So generally, I would think that the onbeat should be louder than the offbeat. So we'll turn them down. That's usually how I would approach it. And more, usually for like something like this, probably more emphasis on the onbeat than the offbeat. So let's listen now. Feel how that affects the groove by having the emphasis more on the front notes versus the back. We'll start at 50 and 100, and then we'll flip it around again. And this is really an important thing to figure out with the groove, because so much of groove with bass is not only what notes you're hitting, but how hard are you hitting them. And at these lower velocities, these offbeat notes almost sound like ghost notes, which is a thing that a lot of bass players will use, especially more funk players, but it's where you hit a note, but you don't really fully hit it. And it just it's kind of like a guitar player, like going, whook. It's that sort of thing, and it adds a lot of groove. And so if you turn down the volume of the offbeat, you're not necessarily perceiving the note, the pitch of the note so much as just like and you hear how it really shifts the feel of the song, whether it's forward or backwards. But generally, I would recommend having the velocity of the onbeat be higher than the offbeat, unless you're doing, something like reggae or something. So we'll just leave these velocities where they are. Then there's also the note length, right? So you can make them short or fat, or whatever you want. These are basically, I don't think there's a right answer to which should be longer. You're just going to need to experiment per pattern, but let's just listen to what they do. And we'll just do. And let's go the other way. And everything long. Now, when you make everything long, they kind of start to bleed together, which is fine. But that happens. So, or everything's short, or really staccato bass line. This is like the sort of thing you'd play in a breakdown in a song, where it's like, oh yeah, you're going all out, and then it just goes to the drum and the bass, and it's often going to be these shorter notes, and this makes that super easy to do. You could create a new pattern and just copy it in for that. You also have the ability to add variations with these variators. This is the amount of variation that's going to be added. It's in most rock, pop, maybe even every other genre. The last few beats in a bass line will have a bass fill. Although if you're working with a drummer, you're probably going to want to coordinate so that you're not both filling on top of each other. In any event, this allows you to easily add fills, and you just can have the amount of fill. And then this is how much of the back end is filled. So this is like a good chunk of it, a smaller chunk. This sort of the fill increases. You got fills in two places, smaller fills, and then this sort of changes over time. This is kind of what I like here. Oops. Yeah. Okay. And you can also do the same thing on the offbeat. Really cool, really easy. I would think you could also use this, as I hear it, like if I were to do like a hit, you could do this for like a harpsichord or something. Like if you wanted like a funky hip hop song, you could definitely use it for something like that. You could just decrease the octave here. You also have choices for how wide of a note range or how narrow of a note range there is. Let's turn the variator off so it's clearer. Now let's go the opposite. We've narrowed it. Also, let's note you can always stack players. So like you could put scales and chords behind this and then be sure that you are always staying in the key of your song. You can also have the root note change to shift with the song. Because really the main way that bass works in a lot of genres is that it follows the root notes of a track. That's usually how I conceive my bass lines, at least. Like, is some sort of interesting arpeggio of the chord triad of the chord, and then maybe some connecting notes. And so definitely you're going to want to experiment with changing the root notes, but we don't have any chords here, so it doesn't matter. You also, by default, it's not playing any minor notes, but you can increase the minorness, which is a technical term, I guess, by using this knob here. And let's hear how that sounds. And we're not actually hearing that based on these patterns, so let's just change up the pattern and maybe we'll hear something there. And also increase the note range. This is just going to give us more notes. We'll hear it with it off. Now with minorness on. So you can see this is just super powerful and easy. Also, you can add shuffle to it. And hopefully this shuffle is based on the rate, which not everything in Reason includes, but let's just listen with a little bit of shuffle. You also have the ability to add manual rhythm spots, like, okay, I don't want it here and here. Now this has overridden it. And so even as you change the patterns, these notes don't have notes, or we could force it to have some notes there. You can also manually adjust the pitch of these notes here. So as you can see, these are the 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I think they could have done a better job of splitting these columns up, except that I guess when you get to the rates, it doesn't do a good job of that. But to me, it's a little unclear where the downbeats are. I guess it's actually 1, 2, 3, 4. So these dark bars here do represent the downbeats. I still think that could have been clearer visually. and you can manually adjust the notes. And so, yeah, I think this is a very powerful, very useful plugin, especially for people that don't understand how basslines work. I think this gets you pretty close. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun for a lot of people to work with. I also think it'll help you hopefully understand basslines better by using it, and getting away from bad basslines and going more towards good basslines. And then maybe you'll start programming in some of your own. So I would say this is definitely, for the subset of people that enjoy this type of tool, a really good bassline generator. Now, not everybody's going to need or want a bassline generator, but if you do, I think this is one of the better ones out there and would recommend it highly. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to download that Reason mixing template, and I hope you have a good one.